Hey students, welcome to this lesson on factorising, where we're going to aim to level up our factorising skills within algebra. So put on your headphones and let's zone in. There are three steps to factorising. Number one is looking at the signs. In the two terms or more terms that you may have, are you dealing with positives or negatives? And can you take out a negative sign? Step two, looking at numbers. We're aiming to take out the highest common factor out of two or more of the terms present. And step three is looking at our letters, also known as pronumerals. What letters can we take out, and also what power are those letters raised to? Let's apply this by doing a few walkthrough questions to see how this works. Let's say we first want to factorize 9x squared plus 6x. Let's start with the signs. They're both positive terms, so in that case, I don't really need to factorize any signs out. Step 2, let's have a look at the numbers. We have 9 and 6. What is the highest common factor between 9 and 6? The highest common factor is 3. That's our second step done. The third step is having a look at the letters. In this case, we can see we have an x squared and an x. So out of these two, what is the highest amount of x's that I can factorize out from each? Given that x squared is x times x, so 2x's, and x is just 1x, the highest factor that I can actually take out from each is just 1x. So that means I can take out a factor of x over here. Once we can see that we have taken out the highest factors possible, we place an open bracket like so. The next thing to ask is, what do I need to do to ensure that 3x multiplies by something to give me 9x squared? So 3x times 3x will give me 9x squared. So we put in 3x over here. The next bit is having a look at 3x times what gives me 6x. So we know 3x times plus 2 will give me 6x. And to double check this, we can go back to our expanding brackets video and expand these brackets to see that this will indeed give us 9x squared plus 6x. And this is essentially how you would factorize. Let's do another question. 5x to the power of 4 plus 10x. So let's first have a look at our signs. They're both positive, so I don't really need to factorize out any signs here. Step 2, let's have a look at our numbers, 5 and 10. What is the highest common factor between 5 and 10? The highest common factor here is 5. Next is let's have a look between our letters. What is the highest common factor of letters that I can use? So we have x to the power of 4. X to the power of 4 means 4 x's multiplying with each other. So x times x times x times x. And over here, we just have 1x. So the highest amount of x's that I can factorize out from both the terms is just 1x. And that is what I'm going to factor out. Like that. So essentially, the highest factor that we could take out from this expression is 5x. Now, we put in our open bracket, and we see 5x times what gives me 5x to the power of 4? Well, that's going to be x cubed. And then, after this, we need to have a look. 5x times what will give me plus 10x? 5x times plus 2 will give me 10x. And that way, we can see we have factorized out this expression. Let's do a couple more walkthrough questions. Let's say in this one, we want to factorize out negative 16, x to the power of 6, y to the power of 3, minus 12, x to the power of 2, y to the power of 2. So let's start with our first step again. The first step is having a look at the signs. Now here, we can see that we have a negative sign for the first term and a negative sign for the second term. So what I'm going to do is factorize out a negative sign, like that. Next, let's have a look at our numbers, 16 and 12. What is the highest common factor between 16 and 12? The highest common factor would be 4. Next, let's have a look at the letters, or the pronumerals. Now here, we can see that we have two different sets of pronumerals. We have x and we have y. So what we're going to do, we're going to focus on each one individually. Let's first start with x. We have x to the power of 6, which is 6 x's multiplying together. And we have x to the power of 2, which is 2 x's multiplying together. So the highest amount of x's that I can actually take out as a factor between both of these is only x to the power of 2. So we put that in over here. Let's now have a look at the y's. We have y to the power of 3 and we have y to the power of 2. Looking at both of these, what is the highest common factor that I can take out from both of them? In this case, it's going to be the one with the lowest power. So y to the power of 2 is the highest common factor I can take out. Like that. And then I put in my open bracket, and let's ask that question again. Minus 4x squared y squared times what will give me negative 16x to the power of 6 y to the power of 3. It may look confusing at first, but let's just take this one step at a time. Let's work with our signs. So a minus sign times what sign should give me a minus sign? Well, a minus times a positive will only give me a minus. So we know we're going to have a positive first term here. Next, 4 times what will give me 16? We know 4 times 4 will give me 16. Let's now move to the x. X squared times what gives me x to the power of 6? X squared times x to the power of 4 will give me x to the power of 6. Then let's move to the y's. Y squared times what will give me y to the power of 3? Y squared times y will give me y to the power of 3. And that's the first term done inside the bracket. Now let's look at the second term. Let's use the same steps. So minus 4x squared y squared times what will give me negative 12x squared y squared. Let's first start with the signs. A negative times what will give me a negative? We know a negative times a positive will give me a negative. So that's our signs done. Let's now have a look at our numbers. 4 times what gives me 12? 4 times 3 will give me 12. Then let's have a look at our letters, starting with the x. X squared times what will give me x squared? Well, x squared times 1 will only give you x squared. So I don't need to put in any letters over here. Let's have a look at the y's. Y squared times what will give me y squared? Again, y squared times 1 will give you y squared. So I don't need to put any further letters here. So I can close the bracket. And that's that factorized. Let's do one final walkthrough question. In this one, let's say we want to factorize minus 20 a to the power of 2 b to the power of 5 plus 15 a b. Now let's first have a look at our signs. I've got a negative over here and a positive over here. So the best case to do here is actually take out the negative. So let's take out a negative. But we want to be careful that we're taking out a negative over here. So we're going to have to switch a sign in the future. But let's just keep that in the back of our minds. Next, let's have a look at our numbers. 20 and 15. What is the highest common factor between the two? The highest common factor is 5. The final step is let's have a look at our letters. Let's start with the A first. We have A squared and just A. Out of these two, the highest amount of a's that I can just take out is only 1a. So we're just going to take out 1a over here. Next, let's have a look at the b's. We have b to the power of 5 and just b. The highest amount of b's that I can take out as a factor is just b. And then I put in my open bracket, and let's do the final steps again. So minus 5ab times what will give me negative 20a squared b to the power of 5. So again, let's work with our signs, numbers, and letters rule. A minus times what will give me a minus. We know a minus times a positive will give us a minus. So I don't need to put anything here. Next, let's have a look at our numbers. 5 times what will give me 20. 5 times 4 will give me 20. Then, let's have a look at our letters. A times what gives me a squared. We know a times a will give you a squared. B times what will give you b to the power of 5. B times b to the power of 4 will give you b to the power of 5. And that's our first term done inside the bracket. Let's move on to the second term using the same rules. Now here, we want to keep in mind again that we are going to probably have to switch this sign, but let's double check. A negative times what will give you a positive. We know a negative times a negative will give you a positive. So we can see here that the sign has switched. Let's now move on to the numbers. 5 times what gives you 15? We know 5 times 3 will give you 15. And then let's have a look at our letters. A times what gives you A? We know A times 1 gives you A, so I don't need to put any letters for A over here. And then B times what gives you B? B times 1 will give you B. So again, I don't need to put any B's over here as well. So I could just close the bracket like that. And here we have factorized this successfully. Now that we've done a few walkthrough questions, have a go at doing some practice questions on your own. See you on the other side. Hopefully you had a go at some of those questions. Let's go through them together. So starting with the first question here on the left-hand side, we have minus 8 a squared b to the power of 3 plus 12ab. And the aim is to factorize this. So let's go through our 3 steps again. Signs, then numbers, and then letters. Let's take a look at the signs first. We have a negative and a positive. So let's take out a factor of a negative sign. Step 2. Let's have a look at our numbers, 8 and 12. What is the highest common factor between the two? It's going to be 4. After this, let's have a look at our letters. We have a squared and just a. So the highest factor that I can take out from each of these is just an a. Let's have a look at the b's. B cubed and b. The highest common factor between b cubed and b is just b. So minus 4ab is the highest common factor between both of these terms. So given that we know that, let's now put in our open bracket and fill in the rest. To do this, we need to know minus 4ab times what will give us minus 8a squared b to the power of 3. To do this, let's do minus times what will give us a minus. We know a minus times a positive will give us a minus. So I don't need to put in any signs over here. 4 times what will give us 8. We know 4 times 2 will give us 8. A times what will give us a squared. We know a times a will give us a squared. And then b times what will give us b to the power of 3. B times b squared will give us b to the power of 3. And that's our first term done inside the bracket. Let's move to the second term. Now here, we have a minus times what will give us a positive. So we know a minus times a minus will give us a positive. After this, let's have a look at our numbers. 4 times what will give us 12? 4 times 3 will give us 12. Let's now have a look at the letters. We have A times what will give us A. We know A times 1 will give us A. And then B times what will give us B. B times 1 will give us B. So given that both of these are multiplied by 1, I don't need to put in anything else over here, and I can close the bracket, and that is the factorized form. Let's now move to the second question. Here we have 21x y to the power of 5 plus 7xy. So let's start with our 3 steps again. Starting with signs, we have 2 positives, so I'm going to take out a positive sign. And given that we're taking out a positive sign, I don't need to write in an actual sign over here. Step 2 is let's have a look at our numbers, 21 and 7. What is the highest common factor between 21 and 7? The highest common factor is 7. Let's now have a look at our letters. We have x and x on both terms. So I can take out a factor of x, given that they're both the same over here. Let's now move to the y's. Y to the power of 5 and y. The highest amount of y's that I can take out from each of these is just one y. And 7xy is our highest common factor between both of these terms. Given that we know what the highest common factor is now, we can put in our open bracket and fill that bracket in. So 7xy times what will give us 21xy to the power of 5. To do this, let's go through our 3 steps again. A positive times what will give us a positive. We know a positive times a positive will give us a positive, so I don't need to put in a sign over here. Step 2, let's have a look at our numbers. 7 times what will give us 21. We know 7 times 3 will give us 21. Let's now move on to our letters. X times what gives us x. We know x times 1 gives us x, so I don't need to put in any x's over here. Y times what will give us y to the power of 5. We know y times y to the power of 4 will give us y to the power of 5. So that's our first term done. Moving on to our second term, we have 7xy times what will give us 7xy. We know 7xy times positive 1 will give us a positive 7xy. And in that way, this entire expression is factorized. Hopefully through this video, you were able to level up your skills in factorization. And if you did, leave us a wave in the comments down below. This is Alex signing off for now. Stay sharp.